Top 10 most bizarre American crawler tractors that actually exist. Somewhere in America, hidden inside an old workshop, sits a crawler that shouldn't exist. It looks part tractor, part crane, and when it moves, it seems almost alive. Few have ever seen it, and even fewer know that this machine, ranked number 1 on today's list, changed how we think about power, balance, and control. Miss it, and you might never understand the thin line between genius and madness in engineering. Welcome back to Tractor World, the journey where we uncover the forgotten stories, untold experiments, and hidden ambitions behind the machines that built our world. From giants that shattered the earth, to crawlers that could float, climb, or twist in ways no one thought possible. These are not the tractors you remember. Today, we count down the top 10 most bizarre American crawler tractors that actually exist. Machines that defied reason, challenged logic, and somehow still worked. But what if the strangest one of all wasn't a failure, but the beginning of everything? If this is your first time here on Tractor World, hit like and subscribe, because sometimes the most unbelievable inventions are the ones that actually happen. Ranked 10th, Cletrac Model F, the machine that taught America how to crawl. Long before tanks appeared on battlefields, an American farmer was already driving something that looked like one. It was 1916, and in the quiet fields of Ohio, the Cletrac Model F began to move. Slow, heavy, and impossibly strange. No wheels, just steel tracks biting into mud, pulling a plow like a creature from another century. People didn't know whether to call it genius or madness. The Cletrac Model F was one of the first production crawler tractors ever built in the United States. Its 4-cylinder gasoline engine produced barely 20 horsepower, yet it could drag through swamps where every wheeled tractor sank. Its steering system was even stranger. 2 independent clutches controlled each track separately. To turn, you didn't steer. You stopped on one side. It didn't drive like a machine. It pivoted like an animal learning to walk. At the time, horses still ruled most farms. So when the Cletrac arrived, coated in riveted steel and noise, it looked like an alien invasion. It terrified livestock, tore shallow plows apart, and demanded 2 hands and full concentration to keep straight. But what made it bizarre was that it worked. Where other tractors stalled, it crawled forward. Slow, steady, unstoppable. A machine that traded grace for certainty, designed by engineers who believed that crawling might just be better than rolling. The Model F was sold to farmers who needed something indestructible, and for a decade it proved them right. Its tracks reshaped the idea of what a tractor could be. Even military observers took notes. Just a few years later, the same steering principle appeared on tanks. What began as a farm experiment quietly rewrote the logic of movement on land. Today, a handful of Cletrac Model Fs still exist. Rusted, silent, resting in barns and museums. Each one is a reminder that America's first crawler looked too strange to succeed, yet somehow did. It crawled before tanks, defied common sense, and became the blueprint for a century of machines that refused to get stuck. Next, the story gets smaller and stranger. A crawler so compact it needed handlebars instead of a steering wheel. The Terratrac GT-30. Ranked 9th. Terratrac GT-30, the crawler with handlebars. Someone thought a motorcycle could plow a field, and in the 1950s, an American company actually built it. The Terratrac GT-30 wasn't just a tractor. It was a contradiction on tracks. 2 front wheels, rear steel treads, and a pair of chrome handlebars where a steering wheel should have been. To some, it looked like innovation. To others, insanity. The GT-30 was built in Illinois by the Tractomotive Corporation, later absorbed by Allis-Chalmers. It weighed under 3 tons and ran on a 30-horsepower Continental engine. Light for a crawler, but heavy for an orchard. Its purpose was simple: to navigate vineyards and orchards too narrow for conventional machines. The front wheels offered precision, the rear tracks delivered traction, and the handlebars gave the driver control. Except for control, it was the one thing the GT-30 never really had. On flat ground, it moved like a dancer, nimble, smooth, deliberate. But on a slope, it behaved like a nervous animal, rearing or twisting without warning. Farmers who tried it learned quickly. You didn't drive the GT-30, you negotiated with it. It could maneuver between vines with grace one moment, then buck sideways the next. A machine designed for balance somehow became famous for losing it. For a few years, Terratrac insisted the concept would change farming. It didn't. When Allis-Chalmers took over in 1956, the GT-30 quietly disappeared from catalogs. No recall, no announcement, as if the company wanted to erase the memory of giving a crawler motorcycle handlebars. Today, only a handful survive. Their orange paint has faded to rust, but the handlebars still shine from the touch of hands that once fought to keep them steady. The Terratrac GT-30 remains one of the strangest creations in agricultural history. A crawler that thought it was a bike and almost proved it could be. Up next, a crawler that went in the opposite direction, not smaller, but double-hearted. 2 engines, 1 frame, and a power so unstable it nearly tore itself apart. The Oliver O C-18, the Iron Ox. Ranked 8th, Oliver O C-18, the Iron Ox. Someone thought 1 engine wasn't enough, so they gave this crawler 2, side by side, roaring in unison. The result was the Oliver O C-18, a machine so powerful it could twist its own frame apart. Farmers called it the Iron Ox, not out of affection, but out of fear. Built in the early 1960s, the OC-18 was an experiment in brute force engineering. Oliver engineers wanted a crawler that could dominate the expanding industrial farms of the Midwest. Instead of building a new high-capacity engine, they bolted together 2 Detroit diesel 371 engines, synchronizing them through a shared clutch. Each produced around 100 horsepower, together nearly 200. On paper, it was efficiency. In the field, it was chaos. If the throttles slipped even slightly out of sync, the crawler lurched violently, twisting the drivetrain like a wrung towel. A few seconds of imbalance could snap a shaft or strip an entire gear assembly. Weighing over 10 tons, the OC-18 could drag implements that no other farm tractor dared to pull. Its twin exhausts thundered across fields, leaving clouds of diesel haze and stories of near misses. Operators said it felt alive. Not responsive, but reactive. It didn't follow commands, it tolerated them. And when both engines hit rhythm, the ground shook as though the machine was warning the world to move aside. But that power came at a price. Fuel consumption was brutal, repairs unpredictable, and synchronizing 2 engines required the precision few mechanics possessed. Oliver built only a limited number before quietly ending production. The company never issued a replacement. The Iron Ox had already proved that strength without restraint could destroy itself. Today, the few that remain live mostly in collections and restoration yards. When one starts, the twin engines cough, argue, then reluctantly fall into rhythm. A mechanical duet from an era when ambition went too far. The Oliver OC-18 wasn't designed to be strange, but it became a symbol of how bizarre American engineering could get when more power was the only rule. And if 2 engines sound excessive, the next crawler took excess to a new scale. One machine so massive it redefined what too big meant. The Allis-Chalmers HD-41, ranked 7th. Allis-Chalmers HD-41, the giant that broke the ground and itself. In 1969, Allis-Chalmers unveiled a crawler so large it made bulldozers look small. Farmers didn't believe it was real until they saw it moving. A steel mountain crawling across the soil. This was the HD-41, a machine so powerful it didn't just plow land, it reshaped it. Even by American standards, it was absurd. The HD-41 weighed over 70,000 pounds and produced 524 horsepower from a massive Cummins VT 1710C diesel engine. 16 cylinders of mechanical fury. It stood taller than most men, stretched longer than a pickup truck, and could pull loads that would stall ordinary tractors in seconds. On construction sites and large wheat farms, it looked less like a vehicle and more like a creature bred for work no one else wanted to do. When it roared to life, the sound rolled across fields like thunder that refused to stop. But power like that came with a price. The HD-41's enormous weight destroyed soft ground, compacting soil so heavily that farmers sometimes had to hire smaller tractors to repair the damage it left behind. Its fuel consumption was legendary, more than 100 liters for a single hard day's work, and though it could outpull almost anything, very few people could actually afford to own or maintain it. Owning an HD-41 wasn't a sign of success. It was a confession. You needed something this big because nothing else survived your work. The crawler earned a reputation that bordered on myth. Some operators said it felt unstoppable, while others said it could crush you if you weren't paying attention. It was both a triumph and a warning, proof that human ambition could build something too powerful for its own good. Only a handful still run today, mostly restored for display at heavy equipment shows. When one starts, it doesn't sound like a tractor. It sounds like history waking up. The Allis-Chalmers HD-41 remains one of the most enormous and most bizarre crawler tractors America ever produced. A machine that blurred the line between agriculture and industrial warfare. And if this was a giant built for peace, the next crawler was born from war itself. A machine that went from the front lines to the fields. The Holt 75. Ranked 6th, Holt 75, the war machine turned farmer. Before it fed fields, it pulled cannons. The Holt 75 was never meant to be a farm tractor. It was built to fight wars, and yet somehow, this military crawler became one of America's most successful machines of peace. When it rolled out of Stockton, California in 1914, the Holt 75 was already a mechanical spectacle. It ran on a 75 horsepower gasoline engine and weighed nearly 18,000 pounds, massive for its time. Instead of wheels, it used long steel tracks powered by a revolutionary transmission system that let it crawl across mud, sand, and trenches without ever stopping. That caught the attention of the British Army, which urgently needed a vehicle that could move artillery where horses couldn't. So Holt sent its tractors to Europe, where they became the direct ancestors of the first tanks. What began as an agricultural design evolved into something far stranger. A civilian crawler pressed into combat. Its exposed gears and slow grinding tracks terrified soldiers and inspired engineers. On the battlefield, it towed heavy guns and supply wagons through terrain that had swallowed entire armies. The same tracks that once plowed soil were now carving paths through craters and wire. It was bizarre to watch, a machine meant for wheat fields dragging weapons through war zones. When the war ended, thousands of Holt 70s returned home, scarred, dented, and still running. They were repainted, repurposed, and sold back to farmers who didn't know they were buying war veterans. On American soil, they went back to doing what they were first designed to do, work the land. The same crawler that pulled cannons through France now pulled plows through Kansas. And somehow it worked better than before. Stronger, proven, and nearly indestructible. Today, surviving Holt 70s are museum pieces, often restored in either olive drab or farm orange. 2 lives painted on one frame. It remains one of the most bizarre crossovers in engineering history. The tractor that went to war came home and kept farming. But the next machine didn't crawl across soil or trenches. It floated. A tractor designed to drive through water. The amphibious FMC Boltrack. Ranked 5th, Caterpillar D-10 prototype, 1973. The tractor that shook the earth. It didn't look like a tractor. It looked like a beast that had just crawled out of the earth itself. In 1973, deep inside Caterpillar's secret proving grounds in Peoria, Illinois, a group of engineers decided to build something no one had ever seen before. A crawler so powerful that it cracked the concrete floor beneath it. They called it the Caterpillar D-10 prototype. This wasn't a production machine or a concept drawing. It was a full-scale experiment to see what would happen if you removed every limitation: horsepower, weight, and logic itself. The result was staggering. Powered by a twin-turbocharged diesel engine producing more than 1,000 horsepower, the D-10 prototype was capable of moving mountains. Literally, its design was just as strange. Instead of a flat track frame like every tractor before it, the D-10 had a raised back with an elevated sprocket. A hump so unusual that engineers called it impossible. But that impossible design became the foundation of every modern Caterpillar crawler that followed. When the prototype was finally tested, the ground trembled. Windows cracked. The vibration could be felt hundreds of feet away. One engineer reportedly said, "It's alive," as the machine roared across the test field, throwing dust and debris into the air like a living storm. The D-10 wasn't just a machine, it was a message, a declaration that American engineering could challenge the limits of the Earth itself. Built not for farms but for fear, the D-10 prototype proved that sometimes progress begins with something that looks almost too powerful to exist. And yet this monster would soon meet its ancestor, a crawler so massive and legendary, it was known as the Iron Elephant, the Caterpillar 60. Ranked fourth, Caterpillar 60, the Iron Elephant. They called it the Iron Elephant. It wasn't a nickname of affection, it was a warning. In the 1920s, when most tractors rattled like toys, this one sounded like an earthquake. It weighed nearly 9 tons, stood taller than a man, and moved with the slow confidence of something that knew it couldn't be stopped. The Caterpillar 60 was born from the merger of two giants, the Holt Manufacturing Company and the CL Best Tractor Company. It marked the beginning of Caterpillar as we know it, and its design was as strange as it was revolutionary. The engine sat exposed, massive flywheels spun dangerously close to the operator, and the radiator jutted out like a steel jaw. Nothing about it looked safe or civilized. It was raw power made visible, a mechanical beast that growled through fields and construction sites alike. Powered by a 60 horsepower, 4-cylinder gasoline engine, the 60 could pull plows and scrapers that smaller tractors couldn't even start. Its steel tracks clawed through mud, snow, and sand, terrains that defeated most machines of its time. But every movement came with vibration, noise, and a trail of shaking ground. Operating it was closer to riding a prehistoric animal than driving a machine. Farmhands said you didn't start the 60, you woke it up. It was bizarre for its era, too powerful for family farms, too loud for towns, and too valuable to replace. Yet it was this very absurdity that made it indispensable. The Iron Elephant became the backbone of construction projects across America, building dams, roads, and entire cities. Its crude, almost brutal design proved so effective that future engineers refined it, not replaced it. Every modern crawler, from bulldozers to agricultural track tractors, still carries a trace of its DNA. Today, surviving Caterpillar 60s sit in museums, still capable of running after a century. When one starts, the air fills with smoke and the ground trembles, as if the Iron Elephant is reminding us that the bizarre often becomes the blueprint. And while this monster became a legend, the next crawler never reached production. A prototype so far ahead of its time that even its makers abandoned it, the Case Quadtrac prototype. Ranked third, Case Quadtrac prototype, 1989, the future that arrived too early. In 1989, engineers at Case built a machine no one asked for, and no one believed. It had 4 independent tracks instead of wheels, a body that bent in the middle, and traction that made mud feel like pavement. Farmers laughed when they first saw it, but 30 years later, nearly every high-horsepower tractor on Earth would copy it. The Case Quadtrac prototype was supposed to solve one of agriculture's oldest problems: how to put power to the ground without sinking into it. Traditional crawlers used 2 long tracks. They pulled well, but tore up soil during turns. Case's engineers wanted something more innovative: 4 smaller tracks, mounted on pivoting bogies, each moving independently. Combined with an articulated frame, the Quadtrac could twist through uneven terrain without losing traction. It was elegant, logical, and deeply strange to look at. To the naked eye, it didn't seem stable, a tractor that looked like it was built backward. Under the hood was a turbocharged Cummins diesel engine, producing over 400 horsepower, massive for its time. But it wasn't the engine that made it bizarre. It was how quietly it worked. While other crawlers clawed and shook, the Quadtrac glided, its 4 belts floating over the ground. Operators said it felt unreal, like steering a building that didn't weigh anything. And that was the problem. It was too smooth, too complicated, and too expensive. Case management shelved the design, calling it impractical for production. Only years later, when soil compaction became a crisis and fuel costs rose, Did the company realize the forgotten prototype had already solved both? In 1996, Case IH launched the production of the Quadtrac, which was based almost entirely on that strange 1989 machine everyone had ignored. Today, the original prototype survives only in photographs and archives. A machine dismissed as too weird to work became the template for modern agriculture. The Case Quadtrac prototype remains one of the few inventions that was both too bizarre for its time and too perfect to stay buried. But if this machine proved that future ideas can die early, the next one proved the opposite, that sometimes size alone is enough to make something unbelievable. The Big Bud 6 V1100 crawler. Ranked second, Big Bud 6 V1100 crawler prototype, too big to exist. It was never supposed to move. But in the late 1970s, a team in Montana decided to build a crawler so enormous that even gravity seemed like an obstacle. They called it the Big Bud 6 V1100, a one-off prototype that looked less like a tractor and more like a mobile building. It was the biggest crawler America had ever seen, and perhaps the strangest idea ever welded together. The Big Bud company was already famous for the world's largest wheeled tractors, but someone wondered what would happen if you put that power on tracks. The answer was both impressive and absurd. The 6 V1100 prototype used a 1,100 horsepower Detroit diesel V16 engine, an aircraft-grade monster repurposed for farming. Each track assembly weighed more than a car, the fuel tank held hundreds of gallons, and the crawler's total weight pushed 60 tons. It could crush a pickup flat just by rolling over it, and that wasn't an exaggeration. Field tests were short and spectacular. The 6 V1100 pulled plows wider than most houses, flattening everything in its path. But its massive weight compacted the soil so hard that farmers joked it planted rock instead of grain. Bridges couldn't hold it, trailers couldn't move it, and no one could afford to fuel it. It was a paradox of power, a machine capable of doing any job except the one it was built for. Only one prototype was ever completed. Big Bud engineers quietly scrapped production plans, admitting the crawler had proven its point. There is such a thing as too big. For decades, the 6 V1100 existed only in photos, a blurry shape with no sense of scale, because the camera couldn't fit it all in frame. Today, its story survives through collectors and engineers who still argue whether it actually worked. Some say it moved just once. Others swear they saw it plowing outside Havre, Montana, before it disappeared. Either way, the Big Bud 6 V1100 remains one of the most bizarre mechanical experiments in American history. A crawler so powerful it defeated itself. And if this was the machine that proved size has limits, the final crawler broke every rule. A hybrid between crane and tractor that turned engineering into myth. The Drott Tracto-Crane, the transformer. In first place, Drott Tracto-Crane, the transformer. It looked like three machines welded into one. Part tractor, part excavator, part mystery. The Drott Tracto-Crane didn't just move earth, it rearranged how people thought machines could exist. Long before the word transformer meant anything outside science fiction, this bizarre hybrid was already living up to the name. Built in the 1950s by the Drott Manufacturing Company of Wisconsin, the Tracto-Crane began as an engineering experiment. What if one machine could dig, lift, and haul, all without changing attachments? The answer came in the form of a crawler chassis fitted with a full hydraulic boom, a rear-mounted counterweight, and a bucket system that rotated a full 360 degrees. It wasn't just multi-purpose, it was multi-personality. From one angle, it looked like a bulldozer. From another, a crane. From another still, something that didn't belong anywhere. The Drott's modular design was decades ahead of its time. A single operator could tilt the boom, lift cargo, or dig trenches without leaving the seat. Unheard of in its era. Hydraulics gave it motion that looked almost human, and the way its arm curled and turned made early audiences uncomfortable. It moved with intent. People said it looked alive, but its brilliance came with absurdity. It was expensive, complex, and intimidating to operate. Farmers didn't know where to use it, Construction crews didn't know what to call it. It could do almost anything, but not fast enough or cheaply enough to justify its existence. The Drott Tracto-Crane became an engineering ghost. Too versatile to die, too strange to live. Yet its influence spread quietly. The idea of a single crawler body with interchangeable functions became the foundation for modern excavators, backhoes, and multi-purpose loaders. Every time a hydraulic arm swings today, a piece of the Drott moves with it. Few originals remain, and most are silent relics now. Machines that once pretended to be three at once. When one is started, the sound is deep, hollow, almost uncertain, as if it's trying to remember which form it's supposed to take. The Drott Tracto-Crane wasn't just bizarre, it was prophetic. The first real transformer ever built on Earth. From the fields of Ohio to the factories of Montana, these 10 machines prove that progress has never been predictable. Each one, strange, flawed, and ahead of its time, carried the same idea. That power comes from trying something no one else dared to try. Some crawled before tanks, some floated, some nearly destroyed themselves. But all of them changed how we think about what a tractor could be. They weren't just machines, they were questions made of steel. Here on Tractor World, we'll keep uncovering the forgotten experiments, the lost designs, and the stories buried beneath rust and dust. Because history's strangest ideas often become tomorrow's standards. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on the next journey, where we explore the rare prototypes that were too advanced for their own time.